I scored a 740 on the reading section of the SAT. I also just helped a bunch of people improve their reading scores before the December SAT, including one guy helped get to a 780 on the reading section of the test. And after thinking so much about reading problems on the SAT, I realized that there is a simple process that you can use for every single problem type on the reading section of the SAT to drastically improve your chances of getting the problem correct. If you don't use these methods, practicing reading will always be a struggle for you. And no matter how many practice problems you'll do, you'll always find it difficult to actually improve in this section. But if you do use these methods, you'll basically make it so every single time you do a practice problem in the reading section of the SAT, you actually know what you need to improve on if you get it wrong. I'm going to cover every single one of these methods in this video and lay them out to you in a simple step-by-step process so it's easy to use. First, let's start with grammar. I'm not going to be covering any of the grammar rules you need to know because I've already discussed that in one of my other YouTube videos that you can see on the screen right now. I'm just going to explain to you how to do a grammar problem. The first thing you want to do when you see a problem type in grammar is glance at the choices. I'm not saying to read the choices, I'm saying just to glance at them to get a basic idea of what each of the different choices say. You'll see why this is important in a second. Then go ahead and read the passage. You only need to read the sentence that includes the blank, unless there's some reason why you need to read the other sentence as well, which can happen in some grammar problems but not the vast majority. Critics have remarked that Season Blank presents the complex ethics of gene editing in accessible prose. Step 3. Make a prediction as for what you think the answer choice is going to be. This is the thing that almost nobody does in grammar, but this is how you actually improve. Because if you go straight to the choices at this point, they're all going to look good. It's like McDonald's after a long day of work. All of the things on the menu just look great. How can you choose the best one? The only way you can actually improve in these types of problems is if you force your brain to think, what do you think the answer has to be? And then you actually check to see, does that answer appear in the choices themselves? Do this enough times and you'll improve a lot in grammar and eventually be way ahead of anybody who's just choosing the choice without making your prediction. And the reason why you can do this is because you glance at the choices already. You have a basic idea of what the choices must include, so therefore it's easy for you to make a prediction. I would guess it's just going to be science journalist Walter Isaacson with 0 punctuation. Now I just go ahead and find the choice that best matches it. It is right here, and D is the correct answer. If you want to know why it was the correct answer, again, watch my grammar video that goes over all of this, but that's all you need to know for this. There are some situations though where you can solve a grammar problem in literally less than 5 seconds. These are when you see verb questions, specifically the verb questions that can use the odd one out rule. If you don't know what this is, again, I explained it in that recent grammar video, but essentially it's a way to just use the choices themselves to find the correct answer. So basically eliminating all the other steps of the process. If you find a problem like this, just go ahead and use the method and select the right answer immediately. No other process is needed. You don't need to waste a bunch of time on a problem that you can solve in just 5 seconds. I look at these choices, remains is the only singular one, so therefore it must be the correct answer. If I'm really worried about it, I can look at the passage itself just to make sure it's correct, but yes, it is correct as well. Passage questions. The process for this seems very difficult, but it's actually really easy. First thing you want to do is read the question. You don't absolutely have to do this, but it does help at least a little bit. For this question, it doesn't really help us too much because it's just saying which choice most logically completes the text, but if it said something more complex, it might actually be beneficial to us. Then read the passage. The idea behind reading a reading passage is making sure that every single sentence makes perfect sense in your mind before moving on to the next one. And the best way you can do this is by literally rephrasing the thing in your mind as you go through it. Let me show you what this essentially looks like. Several small towns in the region began recently offering tax credits to households that install rooftop solar panels. So basically it's saying that these towns are giving money to people who install solar panels on their house. In advertisements for the credits, town officials emphasized the role of solar power in reducing GHG emissions. So to get people to actually want to do this, they are telling them how by doing these solar panels, you will reduce the amount of GHG you put into the environment. 6 months later, applications for the credits exceeded expectations by 120%, even though the upfront cost of installation remained unchanged and local electricity rates had actually fallen. So a ton of people really wanted these solar panels on their house, even more than expected, even though the price of them did not change, and actually it would be even cheaper to just pay for regular electricity. So there must be some kind of external reason. According to an energy economist, the surge in applications shows that homeowners are responding to more than just immediate financial savings. Okay, so it's probably referring to the GHG emissions part. They told all these people that if they do these solar panels, it'll be better for the environment. So that's probably why they're so incentivized to do this, because they don't just care about the money, they actually also care about the impact. These observations best support the inference that, and that brings us to step 3, make a prediction before you even look at the choices. This time we're not even trying to glance at the choices, we're just straight up going in completely blind, and before even looking at any of this stuff, just kind of like hide it in your mind. Just make a prediction of what you think the correct answer is probably going to be. It's totally okay if your prediction is not perfectly matched by the correct answer choice, it just needs to be in the right direction. So I would say it's an inference that people care more about the climate benefits than just the savings themselves when deciding where to get their energy from. Next, step 4, look at the choices and eliminate all the ones that aren't directly supported by the passage itself. This is actually a very systematic process. Even though you may think it's very, vague and subjective, there's actually a very clear way of determining whether each of these choices could be the correct answer. And that's by literally comparing it to the passage and thinking to yourself, was that thing directly supported by what the passage says? Homeowners are applying because they expect electricity rates to rise again soon. Okay, they never say anything about electricity rates rising again soon. If anything, they're probably going to stay low, because why would they go higher if they are currently low? A is not right. B, homeowners are applying largely because they think the tax credit program may be reduced or discontinued. Again, never said anywhere in the thing. It says they offer tax credits and there's no evidence that they're going to stop it anytime soon. C, the surge in application shows that the tax credit has eliminated most of the financial risk of installing solar panels. Financial risk is not right because they say that they care more than just the immediate financial savings. C is wrong. D, many homeowners place significant value on environmental benefits when deciding whether to install solar panels. This is perfect. It's perfectly supported by the passage because we talk here about the GHG emissions, and that's the only thing they give us as for a solid reason why these people may have chosen the solar panels over the regular electricity. And even if we didn't know that, there's a very strong reason why A, B, and C all must be incorrect. So D just must be the answer. This exact same process can even work for these kinds of weird questions like these ones involving literature. In the passage, which point does Mr. Darcy most directly make about conversation during their dance? So we're talking about conversation during dance. The following passage is from Pride and Prejudice. Okay, Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy have just begun dancing at a ball. I believe you must have some conversation, Mr. Darcy. A very little will suffice for you to rather be silent. So she wants to basically riz him up. You are perfectly right. I would not hinder any pleasure of yours. Okay, so he's accepting the riz. We are both of taciturn disposition, unwilling to speak unless we expect to astonish the whole room. So these people do not like to talk. That description hardly suits you, though it may touch on my own character. Shall we attempt to converse, or is silence the wiser course? So he's saying you just called me out here. And now he is again reinitiating the riz. The choice is yours. Okay, so she is giving him the ability to decide the riz. I suspect that words uttered only to fill an empty moment are seldom better than a well-chosen silence. Riz rejected. So Mr. Darcy does not want to talk to her. Or at least he thinks it's better not to. So I predict that the thing that we're trying to get at is that Mr. Darcy cares more about just silence during a dance than talking. He doesn't feel like you need to talk in order to make the dance good. Meaningful conversation between dance partners can only arise after a long acquaintance. That's not really support at all. We have no idea how long these people have known each other, to be honest. So A cannot be right. Speaking merely to avoid silence is less desirable than saying nothing at all. Okay, that's probably right. That basically matches my prediction perfectly. Dancing couples are obliged to amuse onlookers with lively conversation. We don't hear anything about amusing onlookers, so C would be wrong. D, the best kind of conversation is that which reveals one's deepest sentiments. We don't hear anything about a deep conversation here, so that would also be wrong. B must be the correct answer. How does this apply to command of evidence problems? Problems where you get given some kind of graph or table or chart. Well, basically you do the exact same thing. First, read the question. Which choice best describes data from the table that supports Barrett and Rayfield's suggestion? Okay, so we're looking for Barrett and Rayfield's suggestion. 2, the large Tyrannosaurids, the family of carnivorous dinosaurs that includes, I'm not going to try to pronounce any of this, are thought to have the strongest bites of any land animals in Earth's history. So these T-Rex type things bite really hard. Determining the bite force of extinct animals can be difficult, however, and paleontologists Paul Barrett and Emily Rayfield have suggested that an estimate of dinosaur bite force may be significantly influenced by the methodology used in generating that estimate. So basically we don't have any dinosaurs walking around today, unless you count your mom. So we instead have to rely on estimates from different kinds of scientific investigations. And so, depending on the type of investigation you do, you're going to get a vastly different result. My prediction that I make now is that the data from the table that's going to support this is going to show that some different people who use different kinds of estimation methods got vastly different results from each other because of their estimation methods. And now, I can't make a perfect prediction in this situation because I don't really know that much about what the choices are going to say. Like, they're going to say some kind of random stuff that I can't really guess. But I can at least make a prediction that's kind of in the right direction of what it's probably going to give me. And the next step of this process is literally looking at the choices and trying to find the one that best matches this. I say that you should not actually even look at the graph or table or chart unless you really need to solve the question, because oftentimes the choices themselves will have more than enough information, and you should only look at the graph or table or chart to check your answer or to differentiate between two similar choices. The study by Mears uses body mass scaling and produced the lowest estimated maximum bite force, while the study by Koss used muscular and skeletal modeling and produced the highest estimated maximum. Okay, that would work because it indicates that their methodology changed the things. Let's look. Mears, they had a very big thing, whereas Koss had a very small thing. Okay, so the table actually does not support what A has said. So while A sounds good, it cannot be the answer. In their study, Gignac and Erickson used tooth-bone interaction analysis to produce an estimated bite force range with a minimum of 8,000 newtons and a maximum of 34,000 newtons. So we only hear about one group of scientists here. So since we'd have no kind of comparison to compare these people to, we just have to eliminate it because there's no way to determine if the methodology really affects things unless we have at least two things to look at. The bite force estimates produced by Bates and Falkenham and Koss were similar to each other, while the estimates produced by Mears and Gignac and Erickson differed substantially from any other estimate. Okay, this could be right, since it's indicating that there's some differences between the two. Let's just see if it works. So Bates and Falkenham, got that there, and Koss, okay, yeah, they were both very similar to each other. And then Mears and Gignac and Erickson were substantially different. Okay, yeah, they were substantially different. This one's way too small, and this one is way too big. So this one probably is going to be right, but let's check out D. The estimated maximum bite force produced by Koss et al. Exceeded the estimated maximum produced by Bates and Falkenham, even though both groups of researchers used the same method to generate their estimates. This does not answer the question because we're trying to find evidence that the methodology does change things. So if they use the same method, again, we have no way to compare the two. C must be the correct answer. On to transitions. You approach these very similarly as you do reading passages. The only thing you have to do that's different is that you have to pay even closer attention to what the passage itself is saying, because these questions can be very, very difficult if you don't know what the passage is actually talking about. So first, let's just start by reading the passage. Many cities have invested heavily in cycling infrastructure, believing that more bike lanes will automatically convince commuters to give up car travel. So they're basically saying that since they're creating all these different places for bikes, they just expect that people are actually going to, use them. Blank, evidence from recent studies suggests that improved safety alone is not enough. Ridership rises most in places that also impose fees on downtown parking and restrict car access to certain streets. So they're saying that you can't just encourage people to want to use bikes, you have to actually discourage them from wanting to use cars, contrary to what was said originally. Step 2 is make a prediction, just like before. This time you don't have to make a crazy prediction, all you have to predict is one word, or a couple of words. I predict that it's going to be a choice like however, because the second sentence is clearly contradicting what was said in the first sentence. If you want to see a list of all the different types of transition words and phrases you might see on the SAT, I have a video on that as well. It's on the screen right now. Step 3 is just finding whatever choice best matches our prediction. Oh, however is literally one of the choices, so it just must be the answer. Okay, that was pretty easy. Let's try another one. Art historians once believed that Vincent van Gogh completed his famous painting, The Night Cafe, in just one night. So they thought that he just banged out this painting, in a night. Further pigment analysis has shown that the artist actually revisited the canvas several times over a 2-week period. So it actually took a decent amount of time. Blank, these findings have reshaped scholars' understanding of Van Gogh's working methods, suggesting a more deliberate approach than previously assumed. I would guess that it's going to be a choice like therefore. It's saying that since this was the case, this has literally changed how these scholars view Van Gogh's working methods. Out of the choices given, consequently is the most similar to therefore. Student notes. This is much simpler than it may initially seem. First thing you want to do is read the question itself to determine what it is asking for. These are the types of reading questions where the question itself will change dramatically based on the question. So you do have to pay very close attention to what the question is asking for. The student wants to highlight how Lake Baikal stores considerably more water than Lake Superior, even though it covers a much smaller surface area. Which choice most effectively uses information from the notes to achieve this goal? I like to make sure I just understand the question by kind of rephrasing it in my mind, kind of treat the question itself like the passage. They're trying to say that Lake Baikal, it has even more water in it than Lake Superior, even though it's a smaller surface area. So it's like a smaller lake, but I guess it's kind of like deeper essentially. Step 2 is just looking at each of the choices and trying to find which one most directly and clearly answers the question that was asked. Many choices will kind of be similar, and many choices will kind of sound right, but only one is going to directly and clearly answer what the question is asking in the first place. Lake Baikal holds 23,600 cubic kilometers of water, about 20% of the world's unfrozen surface fresh water, whereas Lake Superior holds 12,100 cubic kilometers, or roughly 10%. While we talk about the amount of water, we don't talk about the surface area, so A must be wrong. B. Lake Baikal surface area is 31,722 square kilometers, and Lake Superior's is this. Yet, Superior contains nearly half the water volume of Baikal. So this is strong, though it is said a little bit in a weird way. Like they're saying that Superior has half the amount of water. It's much easier to just say that Baikal has twice the amount and the surface area is different. So this is just, it's right, but it's said in a very clunky way. So we're just trying to see if there's a better choice given. C. Even though Lake Baikal's surface is less than half of that of Lake Superior, Baikal contains almost twice as much water, 23,600 versus 12,100 cubic kilometers. Okay, this is much better. We can basically eliminate B because this is definitely going to be much better than B in the worst case scenario, and it's much clearer what it's trying to say here. Together, Lakes Baikal and Superior contain about 30% of the world's unfrozen surface freshwater. Okay, this basically gives us nothing, so C must be the correct answer. The only time you should actually look at the notes is if you need the notes in order to distinguish between two of the answer choices. For most questions, you can just do these two steps alone to find the correct answer in student notes. So for this one, the student is preparing a brief statement for a city council meeting, and the student wants to add a sentence that most clearly emphasizes both how soon and how severe the projected freshwater shortage is, using specific information from the notes. Let's now look at the choices. Drawing on a United Nations report, the student notes that global freshwater demand is projected to exceed available supply by roughly 40% sometime in the coming decade, making water scarcity an increasingly urgent concern. So 40% sometime in the coming decade. This one says the student explains that by 2030, global freshwater demand could surpass available supply by about 40%, signaling a steep and rapidly approaching worldwide shortfall. This one lists an actual date. This one just says the coming decade, so clearly there's some kind of discrepancy there. A student warns that by 2030, global freshwater demand may begin to outpace supply in many regions, a trend that could eventually lead to shortages approaching 40% if left unaddressed. This one says that by 2030, the thing is going to begin and it can eventually get to 40%. So the date is also kind of different in this one as well. According to United Nations report that by 2050, global freshwater demand is expected to exceed supply by only about 4% worldwide, a relatively modest gap that governments must nonetheless plan for. So this one is very different, 2050, and it also lists only a 4% worldwide decrease. So we have to actually look at the notes now, essentially step 3, in order to figure out which one of these choices is actually correct. It says here that the report warns by 2030, global freshwater demand could exceed supply by 40%. The only one that matches both of those two things is choice B, so choice B must be the answer. So only look at the notes themselves when you absolutely have to. This is kind of like the 6-7 kid. You don't want to look at the 6-7 kid all the time. You only want to look at the 6-7 kid when you're absolutely forced to. Finally, what's the strategy for words in context? This is basically the exact same as transition problems, but I'm going to go over it anyways. First thing you want to do, read the passage. And make sure again to read this very, very carefully. Historians once regarded the peaceful transfer of power from the Adams administration to Jefferson's as a mere procedural formality, but recent scholarship suggests the moment was blank. It reinforced the nascent republic's commitment to constitutional limits and popular sovereignty. So it was like saying that, hey, we're going to transfer power from president to president. Like, this is something that we're going to do. So at this point, we want to make a prediction again. What word best goes in there? Scholarship suggests the moment was blank. It's probably going to say it suggests the moment was pivotal or really important. And then all we have to do finally is look at the choice that best matches it. Okay, pivotal is literally one of the choices. Typically, it's not going to be that simple, but oftentimes it will be fairly basic. Though early critics dismissed Silvina Ocampo's short stories as mere exercises in Gothic excess, later scholars have emphasized their blank quality. So original people just said that they were just like excessive, they had way too many maybe vampires and ghosts and stuff. But later scholars were like, hey, they actually had some kind of good quality. Beneath the supernatural trappings lies a meticulous exploration of power dynamics and moral ambiguity that rewards careful rereading. So saying below the surface, there was all these different meticulous, interesting things that were just absolutely wild. So I would just guess deep, like they emphasize their deep quality, their in-depth quality, something like that. And then now let's just try to find which one of these choices matches it. Clearly deep is not one of the choices, so we have to go based off of what the words actually look like. Ephemeral. Not sure if anybody really knows what that word means, but ephemeral kind of sounds like, wispy, kind of like loose, like unclear, that kind of stuff. So it could be that one. B, labyrinthine. Now, a lot of us do know what a labyrinth is. It's like a maze, essentially. So that definitely could be it. Like, it's trying to convey that there's all these different things underneath the surface, and it's like a really big, complex puzzle, essentially. Orthodox. Maybe you don't know what orthodox is, but orthodontist, those are the people who straighten teeth. So orthodox probably means something like, to make clear, or something that is normal, something like that. And then formulaic. We all know the Krabby Patty secret formula, so we can indicate that this is probably something as well similar to orthodox, some kind of respected, reputable strategy that everybody agrees with. C and D definitely don't sound like it. Now we're just between A and B, and you may have absolutely no idea which one is the right answer. But I would say, since we're talking about meticulous, they literally use that word in the example, it probably makes more sense to be labyrinthine over ephemeral. Because ephemeral is kind of, vague, it's not real clear what that's saying, but labyrinthine, it's very clear. This is like a maze, it's a puzzle, it's complex, so therefore that would be the answer. If you want a really good resource for getting through these hard vocab questions, I have a list of all the most common vocabulary roots on the SAT in my free Skool community with a link in the description below. It's a great resource that can make this process so much easier. So now you know the process for literally every single question type on the reading section of the SAT. So now as you go through practice questions, make sure that you are always using each of the individual processes shown in this video. If you ever find yourself slipping into your old ways, like for example, if you go through grammar questions without making a prediction, or if you go through passage questions without actually rephrasing every single line, or if you forget to make a good prediction for transition questions, make sure you notice that and actually try to fix it as soon as you possibly can. Because if you ingrain the bad habits, you're going to find it really, really hard to change them. And especially when you get into the timed test conditions of the SAT, you're just going to revert to the most basic, most simple way of doing these problems, which might not be the right way. But if you actually use these strategies, you'll quickly discover that you will improve so much faster than you would otherwise. That's it for me. Skibbity Rizzler out.
This at SAT, yeah, it's pretty mean. Trying to judge my whole life off of tests on the screen. One shot, one run, no pause to rewind. If I panic, I'm done. If I trust, I'll be fine. Yeah, this SAT got my chest on freeze every second on the clock.